In the calm heart of the South, beauty and brutality lie side by side. A husband slumped over the living room carpet. A soldier's body cooled behind a shattered windshield. A lover's corpse lay folded on motel sheets. And in Durham, a stairwell whispered of jealousy and a single fatal shot. Now, those once free stands caged behind decades of steel and regret. Yet the dead will never return. And this is Inside Mississippi and North Carolina's most notorious black female killers, full list and shocking true crime cases. Welcome back to Justice Reversed, where real crimes meet real justice. Number 1, Jalia Love Jones. Sometimes, destruction begins with a single pull of a trigger, and what follows leaves more than one life in ruins. On a cold Sunday morning, the 30th of January 2022, the city of Asheville, North Carolina, was shaken awake by the sound of gunfire echoing through the Spruce Hill Apartments complex. Inside one of those apartments, 19-year-old Jalia Love Jones, barely out of her teenage years, had fired multiple shots that would forever change 3 families. The victims, 24-year-old Carl Lee Ellington Jr., a young father of 2, and Staquan Kadejah Taylor, were both hit several times. Ellington died at Mission Hospital. Taylor survived with critical injuries. Police dispatchers received frantic 911 calls from terrified residents. Officers arrived minutes later to chaos, shattered glass, bullet casings, and 2 men bleeding on the floor. Detectives pieced together that a heated argument had spiraled into deadly violence. Witnesses claimed Jones appeared angry and scared before she pulled the gun. The weapon was never recovered. Within hours, detectives tracked Jones to another residence in Asheville. She was arrested without resistance and charged with first-degree murder, attempted murder, and multiple weapons violations. The local media quickly identified her as the suspect in the city's first homicide of 2022. Her image, a young black woman with a vacant stare, spread across news outlets, igniting public debate about youth violence, fear, and self-defense. During the investigation, prosecutors presented ballistic evidence matching shell casings from the scene, and eyewitness statements confirmed that Jones had fired the shots. Her defense team, however, hinted that the confrontation had escalated beyond her control. After nearly 3 years in custody, Jones chose to plead guilty rather than face trial. On the 3rd of February 2025, inside Buncombe County Superior Court, she appeared before the judge, now 22 years old, hands clasped tightly, eyes fixed on the floor. She admitted guilt to voluntary manslaughter and assault with a deadly weapon inflicting serious injury. The courtroom fell silent as the judge delivered her sentence, 73 to 100 months for manslaughter and 29 to 47 months for the assault, a combined minimum of 8.5 years in prison. In the front row sat Carl Ellington Sr., father of the slain victim, his words cut through the silence. "My son is gone, but we all lost. She's going to prison." The statement drew tears even from courtroom officers. Outside, police urged calm after reports of online threats against Jones' relatives. The aftermath left Asheville confronting hard truths about conflict and consequence. This was no crime of hardened criminals, it was the collapse of restraint in a single moment of fear. The lessons resonate beyond this courtroom. Unresolved anger turns ordinary disputes fatal. Self-defense must never be a disguise for revenge. And every action taken with a weapon rewrites countless futures. When the cell door closed behind her, the echoes of that January night lingered, a reminder that in the search for justice, no heart leaves unscarred. Before moving on, if this truth hits you, press hype, stand with the forgotten, amplify justice, and make sure silence never buries the voices of the lost. Number 2. Tiara Nicole Vinson. Jealousy can turn deadly in seconds, and inside a quiet Fayetteville neighborhood, it did. On the afternoon of the 7th of May 2021, the calm of Ferndale Drive was broken by gunfire. When police arrived, they found 22-year-old Kelia Horton, a young mother of 2 and an active-duty Army soldier, slumped inside her car. She had been shot at close range. Witnesses pointed toward another soldier, 26-year-old Tiara Nicole Vinson, also stationed at Fort Bragg, who fled the scene moments after the shooting. Vinson, a parachute rigger assigned to the 3rd Special Forces Group, had served in the U.S. Army since 2014. Her home of record was Norfolk, Virginia, but she had been living in Fayetteville during her assignment. By all accounts, she was disciplined and respected in her unit. Yet beneath the surface, investigators would later uncover a tangle of emotion and resentment, a deadly intersection of love and rage. According to police reports, both women arrived at the home of a mutual acquaintance, a man who had once dated Vinson and was now in a relationship with Horton. A verbal argument erupted when the two unexpectedly met in his driveway. Witnesses heard shouting, then gunfire. "It was like 4 or 5 shots," said one neighbor. Then silence. Just silence. Horton, still seated in her car, was struck and mortally wounded. Emergency responders rushed her to Cape Fear Valley Medical Center, but doctors pronounced her dead shortly after arrival. The tragedy struck just 2 days before Mother's Day. Her cousin, Jalia, described Horton as the sweetest. "She would give you the shirt off her back." Horton's 2 young children, Evelyn and Braylon, would now grow up without their mother. Police identified Vinson within hours and arrested her at a separate location. She was charged with first-degree murder and discharging a firearm into an occupied vehicle. She remains held without bond at the Cumberland County Detention Center. Investigators confirmed the shooting was driven by jealousy after a confrontation linked to a romantic relationship, but the exact motive remains under review by prosecutors. The Army issued a public statement through Colonel Joseph Buccino, expressing condolences and confirming that support services were being provided to Horton's family and fellow soldiers. The case drew national attention not only because both women were in uniform, but also because it came amid growing scrutiny of Fort Bragg, following other high-profile crimes and calls for reform in the Army's criminal investigation system. The death of 2 promising soldiers, one by violence, one behind bars, reignited discussions about emotional control, access to firearms, and the unseen pressure faced by women in the military. This tragedy carries lessons written in pain. Uncontrolled emotion can erase reason faster than a trigger pull. Jealousy, when left unchecked, turns love into obsession, and the presence of a gun magnifies every impulsive decision into irreversible catastrophe. As the echoes of that afternoon fade, one truth remains: no uniform, no training, and no rank can protect a heart consumed by rage. Number 3. Briea Askew. She was trusted to protect a life that couldn't protect itself, but one careless decision turned that trust into tragedy. On the sweltering afternoon of the 10th of August 2021, in High Point, North Carolina, 29-year-old Briea Askew, a professional caretaker, made a decision that would end a young woman's life. Askew was responsible for a 21-year-old patient with cerebral palsy, a woman who depended entirely on her caregiver for survival. That day, Askew left her inside a parked vehicle with no air conditioning for nearly 5 hours. By the time emergency responders arrived at Wake Forest Baptist High Point Hospital, the patient's body temperature had exceeded 110 degrees Fahrenheit. Doctors and nurses fought to revive her, but it was too late. The young woman was pronounced dead within minutes of arrival. Police reports described the conditions that day as brutally hot, with temperatures reaching the upper 90 seconds and humidity thick enough to suffocate. Investigators from the High Point Police Department's Special Victims Unit quickly began piecing together what had happened. They learned that Askew had allegedly gone inside a building, leaving her patient unattended in the vehicle, windows rolled up, engine off. The car became an oven, and the disabled woman, unable to move or call for help, succumbed to the heat. Officers said the crime scene was haunted. "It's one of the hardest calls we've had to respond to," one investigator told local reporters. "This wasn't an accident, this was neglect of the most vulnerable." Following a 10-day investigation, Briea Askew was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. She was booked into the Guilford County Jail under a $200,000 secured bond. Authorities classified the crime as homicide by neglect, an act showing malice, even if not deliberate intent to kill. The charge reflected the belief that Askew's actions demonstrated a reckless disregard for human life. As the case reached national attention, disability rights organizations condemned the conditions that allowed such deaths to happen. While the victim's name was never released publicly, the details alone were enough to ignite anger across the state. The story spread through local and national media as another reminder of how fragile life can be in the hands of those entrusted to protect it. The investigation also highlighted a disturbing pattern: a rise in patient neglect during the COVID-19 pandemic, when caregiver shortages and stress reached record levels. Law enforcement agencies nationwide began reviewing similar incidents, emphasizing stronger screening and training for care providers. From this tragedy, painful lessons emerged. Negligence can be as deadly as violence. Caretaking is a sacred responsibility that demands vigilance. And silence in the face of abuse can cost lives. Each reminder cuts deep, echoing the victim's final hours of helpless suffering. As Briea Askew remains behind bars awaiting trial, her case stands as a grim testament to human failure, proof that sometimes the most fatal wounds are inflicted not by cruelty, but by indifference. Number 4. Kadejah Michelle Brown. It began with a phone, a camera, and a moment of anger, and ended with a gunshot streamed to the world. On the morning of the 25th of March 2023, residents of Green Tree Apartments in Columbus, Mississippi, woke to sounds of chaos coming from one unit. Inside, 28-year-old Kadejah Michelle Brown argued bitterly with her husband, Jeremy Brown, also 28. Both had a documented history of domestic violence, and that morning, their conflict played out live on Facebook. Kadejah, a young mother and resident of Lowndes County, had started a live stream, venting frustrations about her husband's behavior. "He's trying to leave me again," she said into the camera, her voice trembling with rage. Moments later, Jeremy can be seen entering the frame, visibly angry but calm enough to start packing his things. What happened next would horrify thousands who later saw the footage. As the argument escalated, Kadejah followed Jeremy from room to room. The camera wobbled, the voices grew louder. "Stop recording me!" Jeremy shouted. Suddenly, the phone dropped, the screen went black, and a single gunshot echoed through the audio. Sheriff Eddie Hawkins later described it bluntly: "The phone had been thrown down, and then you heard the shot." When deputies arrived at the apartment around 7:40 a.m., they found Jeremy Brown dead from a single gunshot wound. A 9mm handgun was recovered beside his body. Kadejah was taken into custody at the scene without resistance. The live stream, which had continued broadcasting after the shot, quickly spread across social media, drawing shock and outrage nationwide. Sheriff Hawkins called it a tragic and senseless murder. He confirmed that both parties had a past record of domestic disputes, emphasizing that help and intervention could have prevented the fatal morning. The video, though swiftly removed from Facebook, had already gone viral, reigniting debates about domestic violence, social media culture, and the alarming trend of people broadcasting real-time crimes online. In May 2024, over a year later, Kadejah Brown stood in Lowndes County Circuit Court, visibly thinner, her eyes hollow as the judge read her fate. She pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and received a 40-year sentence, of which she must serve 34 years behind bars before the remainder under supervised release. There was no jury, no appeals, just a quiet courtroom, the weight of what could not be undone, and a life sentence of regret. Law enforcement officials used the case as a stark reminder of what can happen when violence replaces communication. "We hope others see this and walk away before pulling a trigger," Sheriff Hawkins said. From this tragedy arise 3 urgent lessons. No argument is worth a life. Public humiliation never heals private pain. And if violence becomes routine, the next fight might be the last. Every moment of restraint could save someone's future or their life. And as the echoes of that single gunshot faded from Facebook Live, one truth lingered: some actions cannot be deleted, even when the stream ends. Number 5. Chantarica Nasha Matthews and Inga Torrence Matthews. Sometimes, the most unthinkable horrors happen behind closed doors, not in the shadows of strangers, but within a family bound by blood. On the 2nd of May 2022, Asheville, North Carolina, police responded to a welfare check at the Roadway Inn and Suites on Crowell Road. Inside a small, dimly lit room, they discovered a sight that officers would later describe as one of the most disturbing of their careers. A 3-year-old boy lay lifeless on the floor, his body frail and severely malnourished. The adults inside, his mother, 29-year-old Chantarica Nasha Matthews, and his grandmother, 50-year-old Inga Torrence Matthews, stood silent as investigators entered. Detectives determined that the women had been staying at the motel for several weeks. Evidence showed the child had gone without food, water, or medical care for an extended period. According to arrest warrants, the child's death was the result of starvation and neglect, a deliberate act carried out with malice aforethought. One officer recalled, "It was very horrific and heart-wrenching. You could tell that child had suffered." Authorities immediately arrested both women, charging them with first-degree murder, felony child abuse, and concealment of death. During interviews, the mother's statements shocked investigators. Court documents later revealed that Chantarica believed her son was possessed by a demon and that she had heard voices telling her not to feed him. Detectives also noted her erratic behavior and refusal to eat while in custody. By June 2022, both women were transferred from the Buncombe County Jail to the North Carolina Correctional Institution for Women in Raleigh after refusing food for days. In March 2023, medical evaluators found Chantarica mentally unfit to stand trial, diagnosing her with a psychotic disorder. Her condition delayed proceedings for over a year. On the 30th of June 2025, Chantarica Matthews appeared before Superior Court Judge Jacqueline Grant, where she pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, felony concealment of death, and felony negligent child abuse. She was sentenced to 137 to 177 months in prison, roughly 11 to 15 years, and ordered to undergo mandatory psychiatric treatment. Her mother's case remains pending. The community was devastated. "It's something you can't unsee," said Lieutenant Russell Crisp of the Asheville Police Department. Lisa Lunsford, owner of the Roadway Inn, told reporters she thought of the child every night. "You don't stop thinking about him. He was just a little boy." The case reignited conversations about mental illness, child protection, and systemic failure in identifying at-risk children. It was a tragedy that left investigators, neighbors, and advocates asking how no one noticed the warning signs sooner. From this horrific act, painful truths emerge. Unchecked delusions can destroy the innocent. Mental illness without treatment breeds tragedy. And silence in the face of suffering can be fatal. Every ignored cry for help becomes a sentence written in blood. And as the cell door closed on Chantarica Matthews, one haunting reality lingered. Sometimes, evil doesn't look like a monster. It looks like a mother. Number 6. Yolanda Torns. Some stories of love end in silence, others, in blood. This one ended with a wedding just hours after a murder. On the 31st of March 2019, in Jackson, Mississippi, Yolanda Torns and her boyfriend, Ryan Christopher Hopkins, made a decision that would shock investigators, prosecutors, and the public alike. Their victim was Celeste McDonald, a woman from Forest, Mississippi, who just 9 days earlier had accused Hopkins of rape. What began as a desperate attempt to erase an accusation turned into one of the most disturbing crimes in the state's history, a case prosecutors would later call a love triangle plot. According to District Attorney Jody Owens, the couple openly conspired to kill her while driving to pick McDonald up on the afternoon of March 31. The plan was to convince her to drop the rape charge. When she refused, the conversation turned deadly. They brought her back to a home on Belvedere Drive in Jackson, where the horror unfolded. Torrence left the house to buy cleaning supplies from Walmart, bleach, plastic wrap, and detergent, all captured on store surveillance. When she returned, the killing began. Hopkins slashed McDonald's throat, and Torrence took a second knife and stabbed her. Together, they wrapped her body in plastic, loaded it into a car, and drove across the Mississippi River into Louisiana, where they dumped the remains in a ditch and covered it with bricks. The next day, less than 24 hours later, the couple returned to Mississippi and got married, a calculated move to prevent either from being compelled to testify against the other. Their wedding license, dated the 1st of April 2019, would later be used as evidence of premeditation and intent to obstruct justice. When Louisiana State Police discovered McDonald's body near Mound, officers found her throat deeply slashed and stab wounds to her torso. Investigators from both states pieced together the trail of evidence, including text messages, surveillance video, and witness statements. The case took years to resolve, with Torrens eventually cooperating with prosecutors. In exchange for her testimony against Hopkins, she pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in 2024 and received a 40-year sentence, with 15 years suspended and 25 years to serve, followed by 5 years of post-release supervision. Hopkins remains convicted of conspiracy to commit murder. Torrens, dressed in an orange prison jumpsuit, kept her eyes low, her voice barely audible as she accepted her punishment. She will remain behind bars until 2047, housed at the Central Mississippi Correctional Facility. The case left a mark on the community, not only for its brutality but for its cold logic, a murder committed in passion, followed by a marriage designed to silence the truth. From this tragedy, lessons emerge with painful clarity. Jealousy breeds destruction faster than reason can intervene. Loyalty without morality becomes lethal, and every crime committed to protect love only desecrates it further. And as the prison gates closed behind her, one truth lingered: no vow can sanctify a union built on murder. Number 7. Stephanie Alexander. It began as a quiet morning in Charlotte and ended with a 911 call that would shatter two families forever. On the 18th of July 2023, 53-year-old Stephanie Alexander drove home earlier than usual. She needed her computer for a class assignment, not knowing that the decision would alter her life forever. When she stepped into her home on Porter Street, she noticed something strange: clothes scattered across the couch and faint sounds coming from behind a closed bathroom door. Moments later, a single gunshot rang out, and a young woman's life was gone. The victim was 25-year-old Tiara Crosby, a woman described by her family as bright, trusting, and full of life. Police say Alexander found her inside the house with her husband. According to prosecutors, the encounter sparked an explosion of jealousy and rage. Alexander's husband later told investigators that she came home unexpectedly, saw the clothes, grabbed her gun, and tried to confront the unknown woman. "I thought she was just trying to scare her," he said. But fear turned fatal. Alexander's own words captured the tragedy in real time. In her 911 call, her voice was trembling, but eerily calm. "I came home and I had seen a woman inside my house, and I pulled out my gun and shot, and she's not moving." Officers arrived minutes later and found Tiara Crosby dead at the scene. Detectives pieced together that Alexander's husband had invited Crosby home earlier that night. Surveillance footage showed the two at a sweepstakes location just hours before the shooting. Tyra's mother, Tanya Hoskins, later told reporters that her daughter had no idea the man she was with was married. "She didn't deserve to die like that," Hoskins said. "Stephanie knew exactly who my daughter was. She murdered her in cold blood." Alexander was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. But as the case moved through Mecklenburg County Superior Court, prosecutors and defense attorneys agreed to a plea deal. On the 5th of December 2024, Alexander pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter and was sentenced to 60 to 84 months in prison, a term of 5 to 7 years. During the sentencing, tension inside the courtroom boiled over. A confrontation erupted between Alexander's husband and members of the victim's family, forcing deputies to intervene. The judge acknowledged the grief but emphasized that the sentence reflected a crime committed in the heat of passion. Alexander, wearing a gray prison jumpsuit, kept her head lowered as the sentence was read. The case reignited conversations about domestic violence, emotional impulse, and firearm responsibility. It reminded many that moments of anger often lead to irreversible loss. From this tragedy, hard lessons emerge. Jealousy can weaponize love in an instant. Pulling a trigger never erases betrayal, and a single second of fury can destroy generations of peace. As the courtroom emptied, one truth lingered: in the silence after the shot, love, loyalty, and life itself were all gone forever. Number 8. Emma Raine. Every marriage she touched ended the same way, in tragedy, money, and murder. They called her the Black Widow. In April 2006, New Orleans police were called to an apartment complex in the city's east side. There, they found 38-year-old Ernest Smith, a local pastor, lying dead on the stairs, shot twice in the chest at close range. His wife, Emma Smith Raine, stood nearby. She told officers she'd heard a loud pop, ran outside, and tried to hold her husband, but photographs taken at the scene showed no trace of blood on her hands or clothes. For 7 years, the murder went unsolved. Then, in 2013, the case exploded back into the headlines when investigators began connecting a disturbing pattern. By then, Emma Raine had remarried twice. Each of her 3 husbands was dead or murdered under suspicious circumstances, earning her the chilling nickname the Black Widow. Prosecutors alleged that Raine orchestrated Ernest Smith's murder with her then-lover, James Raine, who would later become her 3rd husband. 2 months before the killing, they made James the sole beneficiary of Ernest's $800,000 life insurance policy. On the 12th of April, 2006, police say James hired a hitman, Alfred Terry Everett, to ambush Ernest outside their home. For his role, Everett was paid $10,000 and later received a life sentence of his own. When James Raine was murdered years later in Mississippi, his relatives came forward. They claimed Everett had confessed to killing Ernest at the couple's request, and that Emma was behind the plot from the start. Detectives reopened the case, and in 2013, Raine, now living in Missouri with her fourth husband, John Golston, was arrested and extradited to Louisiana. The 2016 trial revealed years of deceit, greed, and cold calculation. Prosecutors called it a perfect plot, executed in the chaos following Hurricane Katrina, when New Orleans was still broken and law enforcement stretched thin. She destroyed every man she touched, said Assistant District Attorney Laura Rodriguez during closing arguments. The jury deliberated only a few hours before finding her guilty of second-degree murder, a conviction that carried an automatic life sentence without parole. Emma sat motionless as the verdict was read, no tears, no words, only a faint nod toward her attorney. Outside the courthouse, her fourth husband insisted she was innocent, calling the system corrupt and the media predatory. She was tried in headlines before she ever walked into court, he told reporters. The case became one of Louisiana's most infamous examples of murder for profit, sparking debate about life insurance exploitation and criminal manipulation within marriages. From this story, haunting lessons remain: greed can masquerade as love. Deception thrives when trust is blind. And justice, though delayed, still finds its way through silence and denial. As Raine began her life sentence, the echoes of her past lingered in every courtroom hallway, proof that sometimes, death follows wherever love is sold. Number 9. Tanyce Kionna Griffin Bill. It was the day after Christmas, when families gather in peace, but one North Carolina home fell silent to the sound of a single gunshot. The shooter was 35-year-old Tanyce Kionna Griffin Bill, a woman from Elizabeth City. Police say she shot and killed her husband, 39-year-old Devon Leon Bill, during a violent domestic dispute that erupted inside their house just after 1:25 a.m. On the 26th of December 2024, what had once been a celebration of love had turned into a scene of irreversible loss. The couple had recently marked their wedding anniversary on the 26th of September 2023, with photos on Facebook and smiling captions about their future together. To friends, they appeared deeply in love. But that illusion unraveled in the early hours of that winter morning when officers responded to a frantic call from Chantarica Albemarle Medical Center. Hospital staff informed them that Devon Bill had arrived suffering from a gunshot wound. Despite attempts to save him, he was pronounced dead minutes later. Investigators quickly identified the suspect: his wife, Tanyce. Police stated that the shooting took place following a heated argument that escalated out of control. Detectives at the scene confirmed that the couple had been alone at the time. Within hours, Tanyce Bill was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. She was transported to the Albemarle District Jail, where she remains held without bond pending trial. A neighbor described the incident as shocking, saying, "You just never expect that kind of violence from people who seemed so close." Officers from the Elizabeth City Police Department noted that while the investigation remains ongoing, preliminary evidence shows no sign of forced entry or third-party involvement. Authorities also revealed that domestic violence calls had been on the rise in the area over the past year, making this case an especially tragic reflection of a growing crisis. As the investigation unfolded, local media outlets, including Wavy News and 13 News Now, covered the story extensively, calling it a heartbreaking reminder that domestic disputes can escalate without warning. One local advocate for victims of domestic violence stated, "We see this too often, couples who appear happy on social media, but behind the screen, pain and anger are building up." Tanyce Bill's first court appearance was scheduled for the 30th of December 2024. Prosecutors are expected to present forensic evidence, including ballistic tests and the 911 call made in the aftermath of the shooting. Legal experts predict a lengthy process, given the emotional nature of domestic cases and the absence of witnesses beyond the couple themselves. From this tragedy emerged 3 critical lessons. Never underestimate how quickly emotions can become lethal. Don't silence red flags in the name of love. And when arguments escalate beyond words, distance can save a life. Recognizing danger early is not betrayal, it's survival. As Elizabeth City grieves, one truth lingers through the silence: love can heal, but unchecked anger destroys everything it touches. Number 10. Shannon Elizabeth Crawley. It started as an affair hidden in the quiet hum of police radios, and ended with a single gunshot echoing down a Durham stairwell. Shannon Elizabeth Crawley was a 27-year-old 911 dispatcher from Greensboro, North Carolina, a mother of 2, known for her calm voice under crisis. But in January 2007, she became the center of a murder that shocked her community and exposed the deadly consequences of jealousy and deception. The victim was 25-year-old Danita Monique Smith, a graduate student at North Carolina Central University and fiancée of Greensboro police officer Jermaine Stroud. Crawley and Smith never officially met, yet their lives collided through the same man. Prosecutors later described the motive as a love triangle turned lethal. Months before the killing, Crawley had been romantically involved with Stroud, a relationship that ended in turmoil and a terminated pregnancy. According to investigators, Crawley couldn't let go. On the 3rd of January 2007, she allegedly drove to Smith's apartment complex to scout the area. The next morning, she returned, this time with a gun. At around 10:15 a.m., a maintenance worker discovered Smith's body at the bottom of a stairwell, a single bullet wound to the back of her head. Moments earlier, residents reported hearing a loud pop, followed by the sight of a burgundy Ford Explorer leaving the scene. One witness later recalled seeing a woman inside the vehicle, crying hysterically. That woman matched Crawley's description. 5 days later, Durham police arrested her. During interrogation, Crawley claimed she had been forced to drive to Durham by Stroud, insisting he was the real killer. In a 2007 videotaped interview, she said, "He threatened me, I was scared for my life." But investigators uncovered recordings she fabricated to frame Stroud, fake phone calls mimicking a confession. Prosecutors called it a calculated attempt to rewrite the crime. The trial began in February 2010 at the Durham County Superior Court, presided over by Judge Ronald Stevens. The jury deliberated for less than 2 days before finding Shannon Crawley guilty of first-degree murder. Judge Stevens sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In court, the victim's mother, Sharon Smith, faced Crawley directly. "You took my baby away from me. You don't deserve to be a mother." The case drew significant media coverage and reignited discussions about domestic violence and the abuse of power within law enforcement circles. Durham authorities launched community safety outreach programs in response to public unease. Behind the headlines lies a deeper warning: obsession disguised as love can spiral into control. Emotional manipulation can mask affection, and ignoring early signs of coercion can turn tragedy into inevitability. Trust must never blind caution, even when affection feels convincing. Shannon Crawley now serves her life sentence in a North Carolina correctional facility. One moment of rage destroyed 3 lives, and proved that silence in the face of manipulation can be just as deadly as the crime itself. Each case from Mississippi to North Carolina reveals a truth most people never want to face: the line between love, jealousy, and violence is thinner than anyone imagines. But these aren't just stories of guilt, they are warnings written in blood and consequence. If you believe justice deserves to be seen, not forgotten, subscribe to Justice Reversed and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next case we uncover. Because the next story might be unfolding right now, in a place that looks just like yours.